Hello, everyone. My name is Mackenzie, and I'm from the Student Learning Commons at SFU. In our workshop today, we will be discussing ethical source integration, how to give credit to our sources, and why we do this. Before we get started, however, I would like to take the time to acknowledge that I work, live, and play on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples, and the SLC also operates on these ancestral lands. So, why do we cite sources? First of all, sources mean all the information that we're using in a research paper to support our arguments. Anything that you've read to help you arrive at your conclusions are all called sources. So anything you consulted, like online journal articles, research results, or even documentaries or DVDs you've watched, interviews with real people, these will all count as sources. Citations are when we give credit to the original author by acknowledging that you have referenced their work, studies, or arguments in your paper. Okay, so now that you know what a citation is, why do we have to cite? Now, if you ask a lot of students, they will say that they just cite because they don't want to get in trouble for plagiarism, but it's so much more than that. In reality, it just isn't ethical to take someone's research and hard work without giving them credit. So citing these individuals allows you to acknowledge that you've pulled from their work in your paper so that they receive credit for their work too. Imagine, as an example, if you were on the other side of this. You spent 10 years doing all this research and getting your study published, and now some university student just takes your research, puts it in their paper, and they get an A without even mentioning your name. That just doesn't feel right. So citing sources is a way to make sure that you give credit where credit is due. It's also important to cite your sources for the sake of your reader. As they read your work, they may be very interested in your topic or how you've arrived at your conclusion. So citing your sources will allow your reader to find and read the studies you're discussing in your paper. This is another reason why it's so important to include as much publication detail as possible when citing your sources. So you may be asking yourself, why do we even have to incorporate sources in the first place? Why can't we just write what we think without doing any research? Well, we all have biases and limits to what we know. However, doing research helps us really broaden our perspectives and come up with our own informed opinions. While you are certainly entitled to your opinion, it's always much stronger if you're able to back up your opinion with evidence. Incorporating information from sources is one of the best ways to pull evidence into your work. You might also ask, why am I just repeating research and studies that have already been done by other people? Now, your research will not be your argument. Rather, your research will help you develop and support your argument. By reading multiple studies and sources, you're able to find pieces of information that support your argument and help you develop your own ideas. As you make your way through your writing process, you may also find that you wish to extend or challenge previous studies, and this is okay too. You don't have to agree with everything that you read, and you can absolutely disagree with the source as long as you show your reasoning or evidence for it. Remember, your role as a writer is to communicate your ideas to your reader, and by incorporating information from sources in your field, you are also helping your reader understand topics in your discipline. As we mentioned earlier, you'll also want to avoid plagiarism, so clearly citing your sources will help you accomplish this. One question a lot of students have is, what do I have to cite and when? So this can be a tricky thing to figure out, but generally it's recommended that you cite 1, anything that is not common knowledge or that an average person would not be expected to know, and 2, any work or idea that is not your own original work or idea. So for example, a research finding or an opinion or theory about a debate. If you are ever in doubt of whether something needs to be cited or not, you may want to consider just citing it anyways, just to be safe. Right? It's usually a lot safer to cite too often than not enough. Additionally, if something is cited in your paper, remember that it must also be included in your reference list or bibliography at the end of your paper. On a final note, you may at times ask yourself, what is common knowledge and how do we know if something is common knowledge? So an important tip here to help you determine this is that if you had to look it up somewhere, it's probably not common knowledge and it probably should be cited. Now, there are 2 main types of in-text citations, integral and non-integral. Beginning with integral citations, here the author's name serves a grammatical function in the sentence, and therefore the author's name appears outside of the brackets, while the year of publication is contained within the brackets, or can also be sometimes incorporated in the sentence as well. For example, see the sentence stating that, according to Barone et al., it is part of the current agenda of social cognitive psychology to acquire a better understanding of individual differences in self-regulation. Non-integral citations, on the other hand, see both the author's name and year of publication appear in the brackets, with no part of the citation appearing in the actual text of your paper. For an example of this, see the sentence stating that there are 4 broad categories of issues that affect commitment: personal characteristics, role-related characteristics, structural characteristics, and work experience. You may be wondering if it matters which type of citation you use in your paper. While it is mostly up to your preference and style, it can often be useful to use an integral citation the first time you introduce an author or a work, to ensure that you are introducing the author or work clearly and effectively, and then use non-integral citations after this. People do not usually read parenthetical citations, which is actually why they exist, to sort of include the information without distracting the reader from the actual writing. So if you need to clarify who is saying what, you will want to use an integral citation. Now, you may be wondering how exactly you might go about using direct quotations in your work. Generally, it's recommended that you paraphrase more frequently than you use direct quotations, as this will help better integrate these pieces of external information into your own writing to form a more cohesive paper. Additionally, it's also recommended that you use block quotes very sparingly, as many readers will simply skip over block quotes altogether when they're reading, so the information being presented in these quotes won't be as effective. Try paraphrasing instead, as this will ensure that the reader actually reads the information you're presenting. As a guideline, try to only use quotes when 1, the language of the passage is particularly elegant, powerful, or memorable. 2, you wish to confirm the credibility of your argument by enlisting the support of an authority. 3, the passage is worthy of further analysis. Or 4, you wish to argue with someone else's position in considerable detail. You may also be wondering how to go about summarizing and paraphrasing in your work. So here it's important to use your own sentence structure, style, and words while citing the original source. For a summary, you're looking to produce a condensed version of the main ideas of your source. When paraphrasing, you're looking to get the gist of a particular message, argument, or idea so that you can integrate this into your own writing. I try to think of paraphrasing and summarizing as a 4-step process. First, take some time to understand the meaning of the information you want to pull, and then pick out the key ideas. Next, restate these key ideas, changing the sentence structure and phrasing to suit your purpose and writing style. Lastly, don't forget to cite your source. Also, as a pro tip, it can sometimes be very challenging to paraphrase and even summarize something that you're looking at. Try reading it, thinking about it without looking at it, and then, again, without looking at it, explain this content and its central message to yourself in your own words. This can be a great starting point for a strong paraphrase. As some further guidance, here are some tips to help you when paraphrasing. First, avoid plugging in synonyms, especially for key terms. So here, really try to focus on the central meaning of the content you're trying to paraphrase. Second, do not keep the original sentence structure. Change this to your own sentence structure and style to help you get away from the structure and style of the original author. Third, change the word order. One way to do this may be to change the sentence from active to passive voice. Fourth, change numbers and percentages to different forms. So as an example, if the original work says that 55% of people prefer dogs over cats, you can change this to more than half of people prefer dogs over cats. Fifth, think about the purpose. Why are you paraphrasing these ideas, and how will this help you convey your own argument? More importantly, how can you adjust how this information is worded to help it best support you in your own argument? Sixth, and finally, don't forget to always cite the sources of the ideas you have paraphrased. As you paraphrase, there may be some key terms that you simply have to use to get the idea across. Remember that the focus of paraphrasing is actually on the ideas, not the words. If you're explaining the author's ideas in your own way, you can paraphrase it effectively without having to change every single word. Now, one common issue that a lot of students run into is what is called patch writing. So let's take a look at this example to illustrate what I mean. First, I'll read the passage taken from the original source, and then I'll read what the student, has attempted to paraphrase this into in their own paper. The original passage reads, "The central idea here is both simple and powerful. The global economy has entered a new era, and a mercurial corporate form called the Source Corporation will become the dominant species by the middle of the next decade." The attempted paraphrase reads, "The main concept is simple and powerful. In our new era of global economic activity, mercurial corporations will become dominant within the next decade." What did you notice about this paraphrase? Is this plagiarism? Why or why not? If you need a second to think about this, you can pause the video now. Welcome back. So now this can be a tricky one to think about because this is an example of patch writing. Patch writing occurs when a writer copies from a source text and then deletes or changes some words, alters the grammatical structures, or plugs in synonyms for certain words without fully paraphrasing the passage. And this is actually plagiarism. When you look at the original passage and the patch written passage side by side, you can see how similar they are. Remember, when paraphrasing, that the focus is on the meaning, not the words. So try to paraphrase content in a way that encompasses the meaning of the original passage, while also ensuring that this is being communicated in your own words. Now, this is another attempt at paraphrasing the same passage from the last slide. Feel free to pause the video now to take a look at this new attempt at paraphrasing. So, as you can see here, the second attempt is very different. Not only does it condense the main idea into a single brief sentence, but it's also written in the student's own words. They're using completely different sentence and grammatical structures, and while the main idea is still there, the sentence itself doesn't resemble the original passage as much. So, to review what we've been discussing, remember to ice your sources. Remember to always introduce your sources with your writing. This helps your readers follow along with who is saying what, especially if this is your first time introducing this author in your paper. It also brings strength to your argument when you can back up your argument with research data or previous studies. Now, the C in ICE stands for cite it. Give the author credit and acknowledge their work. If you aren't sure if it's common knowledge, provide the citation anyways, just to be safe. Now we move on to E. Explain why you've chosen this quote or piece of information. It isn't enough to just thread together different quotes and pieces of information, okay? Your reader really needs to know how you're connecting all these sources to your thesis statement and how they're helping to prove your point or argument. Generally, it's recommended that about 20% of your paper should be information from sources, and the other 80% should be your own analysis of what these sources show and how they support your thesis. Remember, your readers want to hear what you have to say, so make sure you use this information accordingly. Now, before we conclude, here are some things to keep in mind. First, when pulling information from a source, you don't need to explain the entire source to your reader. Rather, try to pull the main idea of the text and show how it is relevant to your writing or argument. Make sure you understand the passage and that you're confident in your understanding of its meaning and its place in your argument. Second, read actively. Take notes while you are reading or writing, as this will help you develop your argument. It is also very helpful to cite while you write to help you keep track of where you're getting each piece of information from. There's nothing worse than finishing a paper and while you're trying to finish up your citations, realizing that you don't know where you retrieved crucial pieces of information from. Citing while you write will help you avoid this. And now, third and finally, always cite your sources. So hopefully at this point in the workshop, this will be an obvious pointer, but ensuring you attribute your ideas to the source text is super important. So do this whenever you can. Now that brings us to the end of our workshop for today. I hope you found this workshop helpful. And if you require any further guidance on this topic or on any other topic related to writing and learning, please reach out to us at the Student Learning Commons. We provide plenty of workshops and online resources, and we also conduct one-on-one consultations with SFU students to help you address any concerns you may have about your own work. So please do reach out. As an SFU student, You also have access to the Right-Away platform, which allows you to submit your papers to be reviewed by tutors, who will then provide you with their feedback, typically within only a couple of days. So with that, I will leave you. Thank you very much for viewing our workshop, and we hope to see you at the SLC soon.